You're listening to Frontier Matters, the podcast from 1914 Reader. Join us as we dive into bold conversations on growth and change in the frontier economies of the world.
Our guest today began building a public career unusually early and has since become one of the most recognizable media entrepreneurs of his generation in Nigeria. He's a co-founder of the Future Awards Africa. He also co-founded Why Naija. Across those years, his work helped define a new style of Nigerian youth media that is more culturally fluent and more directly in conversation with young audiences. He then expanded into political communications and governance strategy through Statecraft Incorporated, working on high-profile political projects. In more recent years, he has focused his public-facing work on conversations about mental health, purpose, and emotional well-being through Joy Incorporated, and especially through his interview platform with Chude. Along the way, his interviews have become known for something rare in celebrity culture, people letting their guard down, and yes, sometimes tears. He's now out with a new book, How Depression Saved My Life, which brings his personal story into fuller view alongside his public work.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. As a lifelong reader of 1914 Reader, glad to be here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you for putting us on your list as well. It was quite a good. I mean, this is something Toby and I just started, so
Yes.
it's really interesting and good to know. Okay,
I was
cool. So
very
I'm going to
glad.
start. Yeah. Okay. So I think my first question is, you've been publishing and producing things in public from a very, very young age, and I mean very young. You started on Dr. Olivia Jonama's show at 15 as host of his youth segment, and you got into university at the same age. Now, maybe a bit of an unusual question, but what did being ahead of your age give you? That's the obvious question. But also, what did it take from you? Are there emotional skills you had to learn late in life because achievements came early?
That's okay. So obviously the first one is the easier one. What did it give to me? It gave me confidence. A lot of confidence, which it turned out I needed as a young child, as a young introverted child, all of those things. So it was immediate confidence. Yeah, I think that's simple. That captures what it did for me. It made me feel more like I belonged in the world. So there's that. What it took from me was two things. I remember towards the end of last year, I just on a whim decided to put some black paint on my nails. And literally nothing happened, nothing cost it, nothing led to it. It wasn't a crisis. I just thought, you know what? I want this. And after I'd done it for like 2 months, I was over it. But when I thought of it later, I thought, these are all the things I should have done when I was 17, when I was 18, when I was 20, when I was 24. But I just didn't do them because I was trying to enter into rarefied spaces and trying to conform. So from very young, I was in adult rooms, just trying to be not trying to be taken seriously, trying to be seen as serious. And so I didn't really have time to do young people things. It was last year when when Cyril Stober was interviewing me. That's when it occurred to me for the first time that I just didn't have the time. It just didn't occur to me. And so that is one thing that it clearly took. And you're also right in terms of, I was thinking the other day of the first few years of leadership where I was a constant screamer, and that's because I just went from being a child or a teenager. Before I was 19, we had already set up our first company. We already hired how many people? And so there was no time to even learn the kind of social or emotional or any skills that I remember thinking the other day when we hired our first set of staff, and one of them was complaining that there's no structure in this company. And now the 40-year-old me is thinking to myself, what structure could I have been putting together at the age of 20? But all of that, so there was a sense of grow too fast, learn the hard skills fast, but almost none of the soft. And learn as I went.
So I read something about why Nigeria really struggling after you step back to do other stuff. I suppose it's not a surprise given that culture brands can be tied to the founder. But given that you're still in the media space, if you were building a newsroom today that must outlive the founder, what do you systematize and what would you refuse to do because it kills tastes or something about it?
Okay, so that's a good question because I want to question the premise of the question when it comes to culture brands. I was having a conversation with I don't want to call his name, but one of the guys who's running one of the more important culture media substacks in the country at the moment. And I was saying to him that one of the challenges we faced over the past few years in the media is the necessity to systematize. The pressure has been put on media companies to systematize. I remember I had a debate with Shea Taylor, who founded Big Cabal Media, when BuzzFeed was posting all these massive valuations. And Shea had said media companies need to become tech companies. And I'm telling you, I was grieved in my spirit because I thought, no, media companies do not need to become tech companies. Media companies need to become better media companies that take advantage of tech. And we saw what happened with, say, Vice and BuzzFeed, and to an extent, Vox. We saw what happened when Gorka and Nick Denton invested all their emotional and intellectual resources trying to build a commenting platform rather than trying to build out the actual Gorka itself and build out the vertical. So I was telling this person that I think that culture brands are completely different from all other types of media. And it's a feature of the brand, like you said, to take after the founder's voice. And the risk is part of the success. And so the best you can hope for is when the original voice leaves, that the original voice has built back-end systems that whatever new voice comes in, the transition on the front end is not affected. So two good examples of that would be Anna Wintour and Vogue. Yeah, she's been there forever. And only just now is she now gently handing over. Yeah. And so somebody can say that might be difficult because she has been the voice for so long. But that is if they don't have a strong operational back end, that is strong financial back end, that is strong administrative back end. Because it's very easy for new voices to get followers. People, it's like how tech Substack is suddenly no longer a long form writing company. It's now a long form content company. Now the people who came to Substack because the writing platform will be upset for a few weeks and months, but eventually its audience will adapt to the new reality. I think it's the same thing with voices. That after a while, now Vanity Fair is the more successful example of this. So Graydon Carter was the voice of Vanity Fair forever. I stopped reading Vanity Fair once Graydon Carter left. But the woman who took over from Graydon Carter took the back end of the business, supplanted her voice, took in a different direction, and the brand still exists. So I think that if there is any necessity to systematize, it will be on the back end of the business, like any other business. On the front end, one voice should carry it as long as the voice can. And I say that because that was my problem with Why Niger. I kept all the energy I should have spent defining, stamping, emphasizing the voice. I kept using it to think about the future. What happens after I've gone? What happens when I've left? And so what happened was that the voice was getting weaker because I was diluting the voice deliberately, And what I should have done was extended and deepened for as far as it was necessary. And when it was required for there to be a successor voice, I would have found a successor voice. To a smaller, not even to a smaller extent, Big Cabal is a good example of that. Up until now, I would say that Big Cabal still has Bankole's voice, even when Bankole has left. It might be a more diluted voice, but there's still that strong point of view. There's still that strong energy, even after the founder had left. So what happened was that if the governance structure was properly set up, then when it was time to find a successor for Bankole, it didn't happen in this clean way. When it was time to find a successor, then the people recruiting will find a successor. So that's what I learned the hard way from trying to systematize Why Niger to.
Okay. So let me this one is a bit of a confession, right? So when you decided to go to the paywall route with Chude, I thought it was crazy, and pretty much I thought it would not work. That was what I thought. That look, this is Nigeria, right? And you're doing, I'm happy to have been wrong, on that, not least because obviously here on 1914 Reader, we also have a paywall now. Also, we are experimenting with that. So thank you for taking that hit, whatever it was,
Yeah.
But you've been public about building premium content and taking the audience funded route with you. When you first put up a paywall, what was your bigger fear, that Nigerians won't pay, or what if they pay and then you owe them something? How do you reconcile with the reality that many people who need it most in a country like Nigeria, maybe they can't pay for it?
Yeah. I didn't have any fears of Sheyi because I thought it was going to fail. So this is what happened. This is literally what happened. I had Pamela Adie, she's a rights activist on the show. And by that time I was, okay, let me back up a bit. When I started with Chude, I was so confident that we owned Red Media. So I was so confident that we had extensive advertiser relationships. And so those monies, at worst, I would get a minimum set of adverts that would at least cover the cost of the show and I'll break even. My producer, Shewolu Yemi, who has been producing Robin Minds for 15, 16 years now, said to me that was a bad idea, that let the money come first. So Shewu is a very Nigerian, is my Nigerian sensibilities. Like, look, these are highfalutin ideas. Let the money come first. They will now use the money. So because of him, expenses were very, 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 very low at the beginning. So, solely because of him. I had these grand ideas for a grand set, grand ideas for... Shewu said, no, let the money come first. Now, when I entered inside, Nigerian advertisers showed me Pepe. It was like pulling teeth out of my own relationships and my own friends. So I tell people that in the first year of with Chude, we got maybe 6 million naira in sponsorship in total. Yeah. By the next year, we got less. When the show had become more popular, we got 3 million. Yeah. And I should have known because I believe that I have perhaps the broadest experience when it comes to talk shows in the country. And every talk show I'd been on, apart from Livia Jonoma's show and Agatha Amata's show.
Yeah.
Every other show struggled with sponsorship. I was on a call with my TV mother, Fumi Yonda, 2 weeks ago. And she was telling me, Chude, do you remember? I'm like, Auntie, you don't need to remind me I was there when this was the most popular breakfast show and we're begging for advertising. I should have known from Robin Minds. Robin Minds, Ebuka has for many years been the #1 talk show host in the country. And we couldn't struggle to get advertising for Robin Minds, even with Ebuka as the host. Yeah. And so I should have known that there was a structural deprioritization of talk shows. But Coconut Head, when you have a vision, you always believe that your own is the different one. And then when the show began to go viral, I was now convinced that it really was going to be different because Robin Minds is TV first, which today is digital first. So I'm like, surely we're going to make, now that it's going viral, now that people are posting clips on Instablog, nothing. So one day, Pamela is on the set. I interview her. She's talking about the film she did called Ife. And she said she didn't want to put it on YouTube because she wanted people to place value on it. And so she put it on a website and charged people to pay for it. For her, even if it was only 5 people that paid for it, those 5 people have put value on her work. So before that, people had been telling me to go on YouTube. They want, but how many years of doing a business in Nigeria, I know that words don't mean anything. So people say, I've been looking for your show. I want to watch it. I didn't believe them. I did not believe them. And and I wasn't going to put it on YouTube because I honestly thought that my show was going to bomb on YouTube. I was certain because it's easy for people to imagine it now. But by the time my show started, my show was a pioneer in the space. There was no Honest Bunch. There was none of these shows, in terms of interviews. None. So there was no model on YouTube for me. And I said what I said, which was the OG podcast was not on YouTube.
Yes,
so there was no,
yeah.
I was taught Nigerians, the only things that were doing well on YouTube were music videos and skits. So I thought nobody has time for this mental health, emotional thing you're doing. Nigerians they're dealing with deeper issues. So I didn't put my show on YouTube because I was certain it was going to fail. Now, when Pamela said this, I thought, okay, this is a good way to shut up the people who have been saying, no, I'm looking for your content. So if they tell me I'm looking for your content, I'll tell them, well, it's on this website, go and pay for it. Fully expecting that they were not going to pay for it. Now, the good thing about it is that just like every tech company before it goes public, my numbers are private now. So if people asked me, how many subscribers do you have? I had my line, we do not reveal our subscriber counts. Because I fully expected it to fail. It was just a random bet. And then, so I asked, and I didn't want to build a tech back end because part of what I had learned from all the media companies that you try to become a tech company, you complicate your life. So I asked my digital lead, I said, okay, could we find a website where we could just host this content and they would sort out the back end like Amazon. And she said, she went around, she looked, and she came back and said it was Vimeo. So I said, okay, let's put our thing on Vimeo. And I forgot about, I didn't even, and I'm a fastidious bean counter. So I didn't even ask her I didn't even ask her how many subscriptions have we gotten. She was the one that came to me with excitement and said, we just made $500 in subscriptions. I'm like, for what? She says, for what? I'm like, that's ridiculous. So I think it's a mistake. Maybe, I'm telling you, Faye, I thought maybe, you know how Vimeo was giving us money ahead of time to keep us hooked on the platform. A week later, it was 1,000. The next week, it was 2,000. By the end of that month, we had made enough money in Naira terms from the subscriptions than we had made from all the advertisers that had given us money in the past.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it just became a no-brainer. So that's how that thing happened. And then after that, I gained the confidence to now put it on YouTube. Still expecting it to fail on YouTube, but I said, you know what? The full version is on the
Paid site.
it's on the website. So I don't need to put the full version. So we put 5 minutes. And so my thing again was that if people asked me if it failed on YouTube like I expected it to fail, if people asked me, why is it only 5, why is it failing? I said, oh, it's because it's 5 minutes now. You know, people are looking for the full version. So that's how we came up with this business model.
Amazing. Okay. That's I mean, like with most good things in life, you iterate, I guess, and you land at the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I learned from it. Because when you reverse engineer it, what I was doing is what every startup should do. Don't come with any assumptions about your audience. Keep building products until there's product market fit. Experiment with all kinds of things. See what sticks. That wasn't the way I was thinking about it when I was doing it. But when I looked at it back, I thought, actually, I did it all right, which is I can't make any and that's one of the things I think that most funded media companies in Nigeria especially do. Because they've gotten monies with a foreign point of view, they import the point of view of those markets here, you know, and so they begin to struggle. So rather than thinking, how is this market consuming this content? They begin to think, how do people that have gotten this kind of investment in other markets, how have they done it? So I honestly didn't think of it as a paywall. That wasn't my language for it. My language wasn't paywall. My language was, how will I make money from this thing? How would the audience pay for this? And I stumbled into a paywall.
Just a quick question, just before we go to the next question, but something that came up. Like, why do you think Nigerian advertisers don't like talk shows? What do you have an idea what the reason is? You know, because I'm surprised to hear it, you know, and it's a bit of a surprise to me. And you know, obviously because, for example, Robin Minds has been on for a very, very long time. But why? What is it? Is there some structural barrier to it?
You know, when I get the free cash flow I'm looking for, I'm going to commission a study into it. But right now, I have some intuitive and the digital space. Yeah, I'm telling you, I have to, because I want to have like the evidence of the why, not just my intuition. But this is what I think. Even up until now, there are only 2 talk shows. So I want to think about it from the point of view of the advertisers. There are only 2 talk shows that consistently get hundreds of thousands of views in that market on YouTube, and that is Honest Bunch and with Chude. Yeah. And if you look at it cumulatively, with Chude, because we are weekly, we don't take any break, we don't take seasonal breaks. Most other, sorry, just a second. Sorry.
Yes.
Something is making me. So when I look at it, I think to myself, and you know, we don't have actual ratings in the Nigerian media market. So what we do is approximations based on how many people watch channels, TV, all of that. So I believe 2 things. There used to be the Media Facts book that Media Reach OMD used to publish. Initially, when they started publishing it and the stations were very few, it was very granular. I didn't used to read it then. My gut assumption is that talk shows ranked very low in terms of the ratings on media facts. I have a very strong sense that must have been the thing informing advertising behavior. Now, when you now look at the fact that talk shows still related to other forms of content in this market get lower views, you can see why that, and that's, I
Right.
suspect that the institutional knowledge just passed down from each advertising. So if you enter into it, and I worked in Virgin Nigeria, for instance, in marketing, and when you enter into it, you just collect received wisdom. Be like, oh, we don't advertise in this or in this, in this. And sometimes you don't even know why, but you're the new kid, you just continue that tradition. So I suspect that that's what happened, just looking at the numbers that talk shows currently get on YouTube vis-a-vis what Brother Shaggy or Mr. Macaroni get on YouTube. Suddenly.
That's it. What's the
What's
last
the last thing you heard?
Yeah, institutional knowledge.
Yes,
Yes, so I think that that's what was passed through.
Then
When I now use the current data on YouTube to assess, I can see how that can
be the case. You know, the distance between somebody commissioned the survey, I saw it privately, the top audio podcast, audio interview podcast, no, audio conversation podcast in the country has much less than 100,000 listeners. Yeah, not talk about the download. So it makes sense. Now, of course, the job of advertisers is to be able to do the maths and say, okay, this segment doesn't have a lot of, but at least these ones are outliers in this market and make buying decisions accordingly. But we're talking about Nigeria.
I mean, that's a fascinating story. I've seen a lot of episodes of the show, and I want to talk about with Chude for a bit. So it's a show that is now well known for vulnerability and emotions. And I recall that Faye used to joke that not crying on the show is now an incredible achievement. So you've said that. I know, right? Yeah. He's an Agbe, I don't mind him. You've said you
I
don't
love
bully.
it. I should take that and put it on a sticker.
Said you don't bully your guests into revelations, and you even bend journalism conventions to keep them comfortable. This makes me wonder about where the line really is, between allowing people space to express themselves and letting them off the hook by not pushing it too much when they're having an emotional moment. Do you have an internal rule on when and when not to push a guest? And on a related question, sometimes do you feel or suspect that a guest is using your show to rehabilitate themselves, an emotional version of Comedy Central's roast?
I love this. I wanted to do this. This I wanted to have this conversation with you guys because questions I haven't even thought about. As you were talking, this occurred to me that you talked about pushing, and this is the first time I've thought of it in this way. I think my style is to pull. So this is how I think of it. My one internal rule, if it doesn't make sense to me, then it doesn't make sense to the audience. Yeah. And so what I do is gently, and so is the intention with which I do it that's the difference. But at the end of the day, it's the same journalism, which is, if it doesn't make sense, I ask, but I'm saying, but that doesn't make sense. But can you imagine how, so I'll say things like, can you imagine if you were listening to this now and saying, but you did this and you're saying this, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So when we started the show, I used to have an argument with one of my friends. And she would say, but you're letting the person off the hook. And I'm like, no, the only difference is that I'm performing differently. You're used to seeing somebody saying, but that is not true. And I'm like, no, the style is different, but it's the same thing. I'm saying that doesn't make sense, make it make sense. And so I do that often. I remember, especially if it's a controversial issue, like I had, what's his name? The guy who was in charge of Tigo, the founder of Tigo that's under SEC. And then you ask the question. And again, the post from which I come in is, this is not an inquisitional show. But it has to make sense. I asked him a question, answer something, I said, but that is not what I asked you. Now I didn't say it in an angry way, but I was saying the same thing. That's not what I asked. What I asked was, why are you not so and so? So the difference is in the style. But my rule is, if it doesn't make sense, I'm going to ask until it makes sense. Now, If you give me a satisfactory answer, I don't move beyond that. That means even if I feel like you are lying, I do not give myself the job of a lie detector test. If I've asked you the questions, I have pushed, I have untangled the web, then I trust the viewer to now make their own independent conclusion. So that's on the hand of that. The second part of it is, when I say my first boss, and I talk about Fumi Yonda a lot, and as I get older, I talk about her even more. When I worked with Fumi, so all my pithy aphorisms come from Fumi. So one of the things she would say to me when I was
She's good with that. She's great with
those. When I was 19, she said, Chude, don't ever go into the world saying that anybody's using you. See, in this world, everybody's using everybody else. Just ensure you are using them as much as they are using you, so you don't become a victim. Now, of course, she was stretching it to make a point, but the point she was making was fundamental. And I remember when I got my first job, when I went into Next, and I'll call his name, I spoke with Paul Wabuiku, who was editor at Guardian. And that was my first, I left Virgin Nigeria, but that was my first real, big job, working in a company. And he said to me, the worst mistake you will make is to go into a job naive, especially if you're going to be leading people. All across the world, there's politics. So if you go into the world thinking everybody's going to love you, everybody's going to be looking out for you, then you are just being naive. You're not being righteous. You're not being clean. You're being naive. And so those two things, gone into the life with them, with those thoughts that you don't get any benefits for being naive. Learn the things you need to learn. Now, in applying that here, I know, of course, that some of the guests are using me. But why shouldn't they? It's like when people ask me, how do you feel when Diezani sees you to court? I'm like, well, did I expect Diezani to stay in a house and think, oh, he's done such a great documentary. This is inspiring. What a fantastic journalist. It's just naive to think that. So I know that they're using me. Some of them, not all of them. I know that some people do it because they're in a PR war. But their intention doesn't matter. My job matters. So whether they came here to use the platform, whatever it is their intentions are, my job is to do my job. And so I never worry about that.
Cool. That's a good one. Okay, so still on with Chude. This is going to lead us into a discussion of your book later on. You're quite intentional about the gentler tone and the guest comfort, but I wanted to, kind of explore what happens after a show is released, right? So what obligations do you feel to guests after publication, especially when the internet turns a vulnerable moment into entertainment, and you know how the internet can be. How hard has it been to edit the show? And this is a separate question. How hard has it been to edit the show? For example, have you found yourself looking at an edit sometimes saying, no, we can't put this out there, or this is really tough, but we have to put it out there?
Yeah. Usually, so a lot of questions inside there, I'm going to unbundle them and then answer them in bits. Let me start from the last. The thing about the show is that those dangerous things are exactly the reason the show exists. To say the unsaid, to say perhaps the unsayable, to reveal things that have not been revealed before, or things that are not usually revealed. And I think now that my book has come out, people can see that it's not a tactic. It's foundational to my worldview when I came back into journalism, so to speak. I wanted to do this show where people could reveal things that have not been revealed, that are usually not revealed in the media in our society. So because of that, I remember I had somebody on the show, and the person sent me a message, and this is a person very dear to me, and said, I felt like the person wasn't happy with the cuts that went viral on the internet. And I pushed back and I said, because on this particular person, I asked the person before the show, are you comfortable talking about 1, 2, 3? Yeah, because that's what I wanted to talk about. That thing, I thought if it entered into the culture, it would provide emotional cover for people who are going through that same challenge. Yeah, but I knew how the internet would likely take this. And so I asked, are you comfortable with me asking this question? The person said they were comfortable with me asking the question, so I asked it. Now, when the person came back, I said, no, but I told you this was likely to happen, and you said you were okay with it. Now, what you're accusing me of, I take it, at least because this person is dear to me. If it was an external person, I wouldn't have this extended conversation. I said, the one thing that I'm proud of in the show is the thing you are questioning. That means this whole show was designed to help create what I call a safe, warm, emotional space where somebody is at home watching TV and going through the same challenge. They watch it and it makes sense to them. And they say, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, I'm not mad. Oh, somebody else is going through this. Even better when it's a celebrity. And before that, person said, I never thought of it that way. And I'm like, so because we live in a quasi media age, so the person had never thought that there was a philosophy behind why I was doing the show, you know? And so that's on that hand. So on that end, I don't usually cringe because that's the point of the show, to, like the kids say, to make space, you know, for these kinds of conversations. Now, sometimes, very rarely, and that's because it's a slippery slope when you start asking people, are you comfortable doing this? Are you comfortable doing this? So I stop myself from doing it each time I want to call, but I stop myself, except in rare cases. So for instance, Mekai K, when the wife and the child came on the show, I just thought, this is a teenager. I don't think he has really thought deeply about what he's done. And so before publishing, I reach out and say, are you sure about this? Because once it leaves my hand, it belongs to the internet now, you know, and they were sure. And now looking at the aftermath, I can understand why they felt that they had to do that. So very rarely I reach out to people before publishing to say, you know, that was, you know, are you sure? Now, once in a while, I've also done that after the interview is published. So if I feel like, I know that I can recall thrice that I've done it, when I thought the backlash was so intense and I saw the person defending themselves. And so I called them and said, no, the thing you revealed, and I screenshotted some of the comments on my page and said, look at what these people are saying. Look at what they're saying. This one said they almost killed themselves and they saw this and they did this. Those comments are the reason why you did that interview, not these other guys. And so it's almost like I want to remind them of why they shared what they shared in the first place. So yes, that's usually rare. Most times, most people know, because sometimes if people are not comfortable with what they said, I narrated in the book how long it took for Joke Silva to give me permission to do the interview about Uncle Olu Jacobs. I did the interview in March. She didn't give me permission until November. Yeah, so every month I kept asking, are you ready? So if the guest reaches out to me and says, I'm not ready to go, that's when I say, okay, that's fine, I'm going to step it down. Sometimes they will ask me to edit out something. Now, one person who has confessed to cheating on his wife on my show asked me to edit it out. Now, it's constituted I considered it the heart of the interview because, you know, and as I thought, if I take this out, the interview becomes bland. So instead I stepped out, I just stepped down the interview. Well, one, I never predict. Anytime I want to predict something, I have Nassim Taleb in my head, and I'm like, nope. I don't predict. And you know, media practitioners are the worst at prediction, and I think that is because storytelling doesn't lend itself sometimes to precision. We're very emotional, so we do think we see the world as we want it to be, and so we declare. You know, I remember how many times what's his name? Martin Sorrell has declared the death of this and the death of that. And I'm like, the only thing that seems to be dying are the shares, the stock prices of your own of your company. So I think we media people are very bad at predicting the trends in our own industry. So I try to avoid prediction. However, I'm firmer when it comes to analysis of what has already happened. Yeah. And I question again. So yes, we media people are very bad at predicting our industry. The world is often very bad at predicting the industry as well. And I think it's because the media is full of so much excitement that even the people who should look at it with a calm eye are also confused by the glam and the noise. Because, for instance, I keep hearing this thing that two things. That one, legacy media was based on trust. And now, most people are not here for long form content, which is one of the things he said. And that worries me because it's not accurate on the face of it. One, many Nigerians already distrusted mainstream newspapers for a long time, understanding that what's on the headline depends on who has paid who, for a long time. So, and when I was growing up, I read Fame, Encomium, City People. People kind of understood that it was part fiction, part fact, So
Yeah.
this idea, I think people just didn't have choices, so they consumed what was available, and kind of made intuitive decisions as to, okay, this one is true, this one is not true, this one is because whatever. So that's on the one hand. Secondly, no true liberal has ever respected Fox News, and very few Fox News viewers have ever respected CNN, the New York Times, or anybody else. So
yeah,
exactly. So so I first use the Nigerian example and the US example. So it's not so clear cut that people kind of respected traditional media in the first place. Now, if you look at the space we're in now, I'm likely there's a guy that I read a lot of time called The Radicalist. Yeah. I'm likelier to trust him than to trust many reporters of the New York Times. Especially when I see that people are bending towards an ideology, and I can imagine the peer pressure of the newsroom and all of that. Many people today respect individual Substack writers than they respect entire newsrooms. Yeah. So even now in the future, it's not the same. People respect particular voices. The people who listen to Joe Rogan respect him deeply. The people the over 1 million alleged subscribers of the Free Press respected Barry Weiss and the Free Press. So I don't think that much has really changed in the media, apart from the fact that the barriers to entry have fallen. The fundamentals remain. The fundamentals remain. In terms of long form content, the most viewed content on YouTube is long form. The most watched interviews on YouTube are Lex Fridman. Lex Fridman literally sat down one day and did a 4-hour interview with Elon Musk and got millions of views. Joe Rogan does millions of views. Stephen Bartlett does 2 hours, 3 hours. When Trevor Noah left the Daily Show and went to do his own hours of content. If you go deep into the broverse, if you go deep into the wellness podcast space on YouTube, it's hours and hours of views. So nothing really happened. I think that tech heads had an assumption as to how the audience was going to consume. And obviously, there are some platforms where that is happening. So obviously, TikTok is short-form content and Instagram Reels is short-form content. But if anything, Twitter went from short-form content to longer-form content. If anything, people left Twitter and went to create their own Substacks and build communities. So none of those assumptions, I'm very suspicious of macro analysis of the media industry by people because they've all been wrong over time. Everything they said was wrong. Everything they've said over time, everything they said about tech has often been right. Everything they said about media has been wrong. So from where I sit, audiences are consuming the way audiences have always consumed. Audiences don't care, is it long, is it short? They care, is it good? Do I like it? And I've always believed that. Always believed. I tell people that it's like when people say Nigerians don't read. I'm like, no, they read Oyedipo, they read Olukoya, they read...
Yeah.
They read those things. They read James Hadley Chase. I'm sure that Nigeria is the biggest market still for James Hadley Chase reprints. It's not that they don't read, it's how do they read? At what price point do they read? Say people don't do long form content. Like Nigerians are still, so it's like during COVID, people are doing Jerry Eze 2 hours of prayer. We don't think of it as long form content, but it is long form content. People are listening everybody to Joshua Selman for hours. He's the #1 podcaster overall for years. It's him and I Said What I Said back to back. So media, people have always consumed media the way they choose to consume media. When there's short form, they consume short form. When there's long form, they consume long form. Nobody ever swallows anybody. And I know that I am pushing against the consensus on that. But it is one of those cases where I know that the consensus is wrong because often the consensus, because the data, like I'm not hiding Lex Fridman in my backyard. And, I'm saying, look at the actual numbers, compare him with the short form podcast compare his numbers with the 15-minute podcast. You know, I mean, Honest Bunches is an interview with a guy called Gege, you know, who is a repeat guest. I think he's coming in for the third time. And the third time he gets over 1 million views. You know, so, and then now we are moving into the age, it seems to be that we are moving into the age of streaming, which is multiple hours. You know, it's just not, I don't believe that people's tastes have changed when it comes to media consumption at all.
Let's take one quick tour into politics, right? So talk about your foray into politics with statecraft. You've talked about how being dragged online has taught you new rules for dealing with noise and criticism. You've also written about the emotional intensity of the Buhari campaign work and later wrote about the heartbreak, disillusionment once he was in power. I know that as well. On this, I can relate, obviously, very well. So two questions, right? What did you fundamentally misunderstand in 2014, 2015? Was it the candidates, or was it the system? Was it the idea that narrative can substitute for governance? Secondly, in relation to the earlier point about online dragging, you know, how do you build a thick skin without building a hard heart?
Yeah, that's a powerful one. I worried about that for a long time. Okay, so the first one, I never thought that narrative building could help with actual governance. I thought that poor narrative building could distort the appearance of actual governance. But I was always firm that narrative building could affect politics in all kinds of ways. Like, it didn't matter whether the candidate is good or bad, whatever it is, narratives can affect political outcomes at any time. That has always, you know, there's this question that Peter Thiel is famous for asking, you know, recruits or into his companies, what one thing do you believe that nobody else agrees with you on? Many years ago, I said what I believed was that the media, and this was before Trump, I said what I believe is that the media alone, without traditional political structure, can win elections. You know, and I didn't care if anybody else agreed with me. I just knew that that was the case. And I think Trump has proven that right. Obama, to a lesser extent, proved that right. Peter Obi's movement has proven that right to an extent. Now, so I knew that. I was certain of that as my thesis for narrative building in politics, going into political communication. Now, what I got wrong was one thing. What I got wrong was to ever think that in a boisterous democracy, at least, in a non-Russian democracy, the party can be more powerful than the president, than the executive. This is our operating assumption, you know, stupid children that we were at the time, was that, you know, yes, Buhari might not be, it's not the person I would vote for if I was choosing candidates from the scratch, but then there's Ashibaju, and there's Fayemi, and there's Bola Tinubu, and there's Fashola. So, you know, these are the people that are going to run the government. And Buhari is going to be like the Azikiwe of this arrangement. He's going to be the one, the ceremonial leader that brings all the disparate factions together. And then Tinubu is going to be the brain. Well, not Tinubu literally, but the Tinubu machine was going to be the administrative brain of this government. That was the naive assumption that I had. And different people on the value chain had the same assumption in more sophisticated language. That was
I hold my hand and say, yes, I was one of those as well. So you're not, you're not alone.
I was not in any way connected to the campaign or any, but I've also heard this from so many people who were involved.
Exactly. And, you know, I wrote in my book that there were grifters. Of course, there are always grifters in politics. Even the governors were shocked by how he switched up on them. I mean, now Tinubu's people are losing up and they are saying it all over the place. Tinubu literally just stepped back, you know, and thought, this is not how we thought this was going to go. Even the people, the governors, I remember they said, a set of governors, I'm sure you must have heard the story for you, some governor walked into with policy papers. The man said, please get out of here. What am I doing with this?
Many such cases, as they say.
Such cases. So it wasn't just naivety. So sometimes, you know, there's a famous meme on social media. People say, well, Chude, you will see. And I'm like, it wasn't just politically inexperienced people that made the assumption. Politically seasoned people made this assumption as well. So that was the number one big mistake that I made, you know, in assuming this. The second mistake I made was that Buhari fundamentally had changed from the Buhari that we heard about. And that is because Debola, especially, who is my co-founder at Red, spent a lot of time with Buhari. It didn't take us time to convince him to put on a suit. It didn't take us time to convince him to do a Q&A with young people in Lagos. There was nothing that we suggested. You know, it took no convincing to have, because we hired Bayo Moboriowo for the campaign. Then Buhari fell in love with Bayo Moboriowo and took him into the presidency. He had no issue saying, we need to dedicate a photographer to you, you know, at every moment. So for our own job, for all the things that he had warned us, so coming in, his people had warned us, you know, he's a stubborn general. There was a constant cooperation with expertise, you know, on our own end. And he surrendered the administration of the campaign to, you know, different powers, to Amechi as the DG. So even and sometimes, you know, people will say the campaign, the way a campaign is run shows you how the administration will be run. Not always true, but it's a good heuristic. So looking at that, we thought, okay, this man seems to have changed. This man seems to have mellowed. This man seems to have realized that, you know, the world is bigger, you know. And to be honest, by the time he won the election, I had become a fan, because it wasn't reported speech. It was what I was seeing. It was what I was hearing. So that was, on a lesser level, the mistake that I made, that we thought that he had become a different type of leader. But once he got in, I remember, like I write in my book, someone called me from Daura and said, Chude, I think we've created a monster. And of course, created is an exaggeration, because, you know, it's just storytelling we did. But I said, why? I said, look, he's not listening to anybody. That's why the person told me the story. You know, CTC, the governors were grumbling. And then I saw him spending all this time doing courtesy visits. I just thought, where is the sense of urgency? So at that time, and I, like hiring and firing, I very quickly make conclusions based on the available facts. Month one into transition, I knew that this was a mistake, you know, and it was just to hope for the best. So those were the two mistakes that I made. And there are mistakes that continue to humble me to this day. So that's answer that question. The other one about criticism. Very little criticism moves me these days. Very little. And I'm saying very little because I don't want to sound like I'm inflexible now and I'm just rolling stone of, you know, but I think that, I mean, for you, the way me and you met the first time was you wrote an article criticizing me.
Yeah, I think that's happened a few times.
Yes, exactly. When I was reading this article, first of all, I just thought this is so unfair to me. But I also thought, but this is so well written. First thing I did was reach out to him to write for Why Nigeria. And I was, 24, 25 at the time. Now, when I look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, the fact that I was criticized so early in my life has prepared me for the later part of my life. So when people say something, I'm like, you're accusing me of collecting bribes from presidents. Like, when you compare this to that, this is small. So I think that I was very lucky to be criticized very early in my life. So I began to learn the difference between other people's perceptions and my reality. That has been priceless for me. That's on the one hand. On the second hand, I don't have the passwords to my social media accounts, you know, and I don't have burner accounts. I can hardly manage my actual life. So I don't have access to social media. Anything I see, somebody that forwarded it to me. And I did that because I saw what it was doing to me. You know, it was distorting my view of reality. It was affecting my moods. And so I stopped. I just said, and I counted the cost. I'm like, does this really materially help my life? Like, what does it do? Like, am I better served reading a book or listening to a Twitter thread by people who claim to know what they're talking about and don't really? And so I just said, no, there was no trade-off in going off social media. Now, maybe it would have been a different matter entirely if I didn't have a popular show. Maybe I would have felt the need to build my voice using social media. I don't know. But because I had this popular show, it was easy for me to say, F it, I'm just going to focus on my work. In terms of, and I worried about being an unfeeling person, because I didn't want, you know what they said, I didn't want them to make me into something I wasn't, because I'm an emotional person. I feel my emotions deeply, and I like that. What I did for that is actually being away from the noise helps me feel my emotions better. Sometimes when somebody criticizes me, honestly, sometimes I feel the empathy towards the person. So being away from social media helped me understand how people saw me during the elections. And I thought, there's no difference in their eyes between me and politicians. Like, you're all doing political work, you're all eating political money. So you come into the social media, you come into social media and saying, I did this because of my, I remember, because I wrote, one of the things that people used to mock me for was me saying that I cried, during a prayer session for Buhari. I cringed just thinking to myself, what do you think was going to happen when you put it on social media, you cried over a politician? Did you think you're going to be like, oh, what a beautiful heart? Telling you, I was just thinking to myself that you were so stupid. Nobody cares about you. Are doing politics. And in my own case, I was even paid to do a job, even if I believed in the candidate. And I'm like, nobody cares whether you wept on the floor for him. But I had to have a lot of distance from social media to see clearly. And I think part of it is because I don't see the vehemence and the virulence of the actual criticism, so I don't get distracted by the sharpness. So instead, if people say, if there's any documentary coming out, people say, why haven't you done a documentary on Buhari? I can look at them and say, these people are just playing games on social media. They've not really thought about this thing deeply. So that has made me even feel better. Like, I'm able to understand better. I'm able to empathize better because I've protected my heart from the actual poison. Because without the poison of the way it is delivered, without the poison of the etc., it's just criticism. It's just, criticism. So I think inversely, not being on social media has helped me be more in touch with my emotions when people criticize me, because I'm not distracted by the poison.
Let me do a quick, I'm flexing my journalistic creds here. A quick follow-up on the Buhari question, because I'll let Feyi talk about the book because I haven't read it. So it's important that you talked about what you, but what did that experience teach you? Because, okay, from my own experience, where I was in 2015 was the big thing around Jonathan's neck was corruption. And he became this widely unpopular candidate. So I wasn't really, rolling with him. But on the other hand, I wasn't messing with Buhari either, because the campaign was really good. I mean, I didn't even know that you guys were behind it, but listening to the candidate himself just never managed to convince me, even though the intent was there. And I recall I discussed this with Feyi on Twitter at the time, and I was like, I'm not going to vote. I'm just going to stay in my house. Looking back now, that was naive, because it would actually have been better if Jonathan had won that election. When we all suffered it, when him and Emefiele were setting fires to the economy in 2016, I recall also quickly said, corrupt economy is actually better than a collapsed one. So what did you learn from that experience that can serve as a heuristic, going forward? Because, I mean, we are all involved in politics one way or the other. We all want Nigeria to remain democratic, to be better governed, to have a better economy. We all do business here. We are all invested here. Can serve as a heuristic. What did you learn from that experience?
Right. Two things. Just wanted to. You didn't ask me this, but I was with some movers and shakers a week ago, and we're debating democracy. And I like the way you crafted the question, because what I think about the thing you said is inside the way you said it, which is, we all invest in Nigeria, we all want it to succeed, have democracy. I realized that the only people that really want democracy in Nigeria are the economic elite. Because we've gotten to the stage in our lives where individual liberty now matters, because we've conquered economic considerations. There's no evidence going around Nigeria that Nigerians want them. They don't care. They don't care if it's a strong man, if it's a strong... They don't care. They just...
No, it's there in the turnouts. It's there in the turnouts. The turnouts are 20%, 30%,
Yes. Now, what I learned... So that it's a pet peeve of mine, because I'm in the stage of my life where sound democracy, I'm a child of democracy, I've done speeches about democracy, and I'm in the stage of my life where, we are reconsidering our political philosophies. As we look to the east, we look to the west, I just like, you know, did I really read the right books? You know, so let's leave. That's not what you asked me. So let me leave that one. Now, what I learned from Buhari's election was extreme political humility. Extreme political humility. Let me come to the future. I find it, you know, let me leave Nigeria. No, Nigeria and America. So I said, so two things shook my political worldview at the same time. If you interacted with me on social media in 2016, you would know that I was all for Hillary. I supported, if I was going to vote in elections, I supported Hillary over Barack Obama, even before we talk about Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. I always thought Hillary should be president of America. Now, and you know, I was a diehard for Hillary Clinton fan. Now, the reason why I didn't support Barack Obama was I now am a fan of Obama, but before he came in, I always get irritated by people who campaign in poetry and then get into power and say it's all prose. Because this is not a hidden thing. There's literally a quote that says you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose. So I remember there was a time when Hillary Clinton said in a campaign stop, I think in New Hampshire, he says the sky is going to open, the heavens, the angels are going to sing, and it's going to bring the country together. And she says, oh, spare me that. And you know, and everybody attacked Hillary Clinton and said, oh, she was a cynic. And I'm like, she's not a cynic. She has been in the presidency, and she knows how difficult it is to make change happen. So to your first question about Buhari's eloquence, I don't care for eloquence when it comes to political leadership. You know, it's irrelevant. There's no correlation between eloquence and actually getting things done. So as far as I was concerned, it was not about Buhari's eloquence or his ability to communicate. It was about the political structure and the administrative structure that was behind his government. So that's why I could ignore the way he spoke. I could ignore all of that. It's like, it didn't matter to me because I thought this man can get things done with the team that he has. So that's on the answer for that. The other part about what I learned was political humility, because I was so confident to be that this country was about to change. Let me tell you, I wish there was a way that you could do an MRI for your heart or an X-ray. Now, this is now talking about you not voting for Jonathan, not voting for Buhari. If you had told me this in 2015 before the election, my respect for you would have dropped. So that's how arrogant I was in my conviction. So every time I met intelligent people who wanted to vote for Jonathan, I was shocked. I couldn't conceive of it. And I remember that I was talking to one of my young men, and he said, look, Chude, you've not answered me. What is Buhari's track record for growing the economy? You know, what is the thing about Buhari? And I kept telling him that is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. The Abuja was bombed last year. The Chibok girls have still not been found. There is no moral case for voting for Jonathan. I could not conceive of anybody with sound morality voting for Jonathan. So now I see it, you know. Now this is why the internet, some perception of the internet have not forgiven me, because people always think that when they ask me, would I make a different choice now, that my answer will be yes. I tell them my answer is not an automatic yes, because I do think that we were really between the devil and the deep blue sea, and it now came down to taste. What was more important to you? You know, this growing economy or supporting a morally distasteful, in my opinion, government? Yeah. So, but now I now know that those who chose Jonathan had as legitimate a reason to have chosen Jonathan as I did. You know, and so I am no longer arrogant about politics. I'm no longer confident about any politician until they've got in. I go in, I vote because that's what I have to do. But I'm like, when the person enters government, we'll now see what the person can do. So that is even in American politics. I remember even Hillary and all of that. I'm just like, politics across the world, I get shocked. You know, when people have been wrong over and over again and they are still confident the next time. I'm like, did you learn nothing from the last 3 times that you were absolutely sure? So I've learned extreme political. Buhari humbled me. He damaged my certainties about a lot of things.
Yeah. It did. Oh well. Okay, cool. Now let's come to your new book, right?
Right.
How Depression Saved My Life. The memoir, and that's what it is framed as Depression Saved My Life. So with public discussion of things like suicidal ideation, therapy, faith, and hope. You've also said is your most important message. So my first question is this. What is the most dangerous misunderstanding of the book's title? What do you not want people to take from Depression Saved My Life as a title?
Right. It's not what you would think, I think, but let me try and say. The one thing I don't want to take on the title is that it's about depression. Because it's not really about depression, it's about adversity, it's about trouble. Now, on the other hand, I'm willing to annoy certain people whom I think I'm taking a pathology, which is depression as a clinical illness, and I'm making it seem like a motivation thing. Like, once you are depression, I'm willing for people to be a bit irritated by that if they are intellectuals or if they are, people who are researchers into mental health, because even the science on the debates on the pathology of depression is not settled. When you actually when you wade into it, it's not settled. So, and we have gone to town with the chemical imbalance theory, which is just one school of depression studies. Yeah. There are well-credentialed doctors and professors who believe that it's more psychosocial and socio-emotional, than pharmacological. Sorry, I'm just trying to look for a simpler, non-pretentious word, but that's what came. And so for me, I want the motivational-ish, self-help-ish bent of that title is baked in. So that's what I mean by it's not the way you think about it. That's not, if people think that, oh, he's saying that I can survive this, I'm like, that would not be an incorrect way of interpreting the title. But for me, it's not about depression. Depression is my specific issue that I overcame, but it's more broadly about how the worst thing in your life, on a fundamental level, can help you experience life deeper. It's not even in that Nigerian motivational way of, depression is your key to. No, it's like there is something called there's a deeper life. There's a deeper dimension to the life we all live. And sometimes adversity is the portal to that deeper life. Pleasure is not the portal to it. Achievement is not the portal to it. Success is not the portal to it. Sometimes the portal to that deeper experience of life's meaning, of consciousness, is adversity. That's what happened with me. That's how depression saved my life. It helped me realize that there were deeper dimensions to this life that I was not aware of in my pursuit of pleasure.
Okay. I remember one of the quotes that I learned very, very young that stayed with me also is adversity introduces a man to himself. I can't forget I can't remember who said it now, but it was something that has always stayed with me. And we live in a world where people run away from these things now. So I guess the balance is in how do people lean into that and also at the same time, treat it for what it is.
Yeah.
Staying with the theme of the book, what did depression save you from, right? Was it your ambition, your persona, your character, your relationships, your need for applause? As the kids say, when you dip it, what were you really saved from?
I love it. All the things you mentioned, apart from the first, which is ambition, because I'm still extremely ambitious. What depression saved me from was a shallow understanding of what life. Now, I deliberately said of what life is because none of us really knows what life is. I just realized. I remember one day I was on Twitter tweeting about religion, and some person with like 200 followers, and I'm saying that to shit so that the person wasn't like a thought leader or anything, said, you see, this thing you are saying, it betrays an understanding of what the Catholic Bible says, or something like that. Before that, I didn't even know that the Bible that the Catholics were reading was different from the Bible I was reading. Until somebody on Twitter called me out, I didn't know. And I stopped and I said, and I've been talking with such confidence. And I went and read, and I thought, my God, oh my God. To an extent, what depression did was, you see, I don't want to go into this cliche criticism of the industrial age, but we're put through this factory. We're told that, do these things, climb this staircase, go onto this, after this, go onto this, after this, go onto this. You come out of school, you get a good job, or you run a business, eventually you speak at a session at the World Economic Forum, then you build a company, then you retire. Honestly, there was no other pathway. I didn't think there was any other pathway in the world for me to. There was no way to live a life of impact and meaning than to climb the economic and social ladder, And it's not as if I knew that there was another option and I chose this. I didn't know that there was another option. I didn't know that there were other possibilities in life. I didn't know that it was possible to go just a step further from happiness into something called joy, which is a deeper satisfaction with the life you have, however it is, And that's what depression saved me from, because there was this entire life available to me, this entire internal and external experience available to me. And I was blithely unaware of it. Just living, it's like I used to tell people, I used to hate going to Abuja. And why not? Because anytime I was in Abuja, I was in a minister's office. I remember one time I felt so sorry. I went to a super minister's office, and I was sitting down there with another minister who was waiting for this minister for 2 hours. And I spent that whole time, and then when they eventually called, they called me before the minister. And I just said, hey, God, this poor man has been... and I hated Abuja because that was what I was doing. Let me tell you, I hated work. I like politics, but I hated working with Nigerian politicians, because a Nigerian politician can be telling you something and he means the exact opposite of what he's saying, and he expects you to know that that's what is happening, which is where I was always tripped up, because I'm like, I almost have a bit of Asperger, so I hang on to words. So I'm like, wait, he just talked about integrity just now, and he's saying that I should increase the invoice. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I hated Abuja. Because when I would go to Abuja, it was all these guys I would spend time with. I didn't even know that I had a choice in my life to say, I want to stop dealing with politicians. Like, I just don't like them, so I'm not going to deal with them. Now I go to Abuja and I love it, because when I go to Abuja, I'm going to the restaurants, I'm going to the art galleries, I'm going to, the mountains, I'm just like, this same life, this same country, even in fact, there was currency, and in the same location, I'm having a different experience of life. So that's what depression saved me from. It just made me realize, if I hadn't gotten depressed, I would never have left social media. I would never have found the courage to say, I run a media business. I need to push my brand out there. I can leave social media. Just all kinds of choices that I was making in my life that I didn't know that I had options for. And if not for the worst thing that happened to me, I wouldn't have been aware of all that was possible for me.
By any measure, you are a high-achieving Nigerian, right? However, we defined the word, like we said at the start of the show, you started at 15, you've been around for so long. So when someone like you comes out with a message like this, right? So, I was high-achieving, meanwhile, I was battling all this stuff, off camera, that sort of thing. I think a lot of people will sit up and pay attention, right? So what's one thing you want similar high-achieving Nigerians to unlearn about what we call hustle culture and hustling in general, before it breaks them, before it gets to the point where it can do them damage? So you're a tribune from the future, and you are coming back to tell them about, what is a warning you have for them about hustling culture?
Yeah. I'm trying to be politically correct in saying this. Because, we live in a world now where whenever you say anything, people will say, but you do not consider the systemic structures of, that have put people down.
Yeah, fuck that.
But that it is not necessary. So I write in the book that I participated fully in hustle culture. And I'm sure on some level, 5% of my life still participate in it because it's difficult not to. It's the prevailing culture of the day. But what I realized is that it was not necessary. That all the damage I did to myself, my back, all of that has exacerbated the Tourette syndrome symptoms. All of that wasn't necessary. That I could, there's a verse in Proverbs. Yeah. Do not overwork yourself for money. For your own sake, cease. And I remember and I discovered this after depression because I was looking for solutions everywhere, and the first place to go was the Bible. And I thought, wait, this has been in the Bible. My pastor never preached this to me. And do not overwork yourself. It's such priceless information because, like I try to say to people, the Bible doesn't say don't work for money. It says don't overwork. So there's a point at which work becomes overwork, where your body is screaming, your mind is screaming, your spirit is screaming, but you feel I just have to keep going, where nothing is ever enough because you just have to keep doing. And for me, I realized that I participated in. I remember I actually wrote a blog post saying it is supposed to be hard, And I look back at that blog post and think, oh my God, how do I reach every person that read that and say some things will be hard, but not everything is supposed to be hard? Because what I always say is that this life will come with its own troubles anyway. Trouble will come. All of us will deal with trouble. We don't have to go using our metaphors to look for trouble that doesn't need to come. We don't have to build businesses that are founded on things that we are not good at. We don't need to spend time with investors we don't like. The way that I'm irritated by hustle culture now, like if in our companies, it's a catchphrase. If we follow up with somebody once, twice, we say, don't hustle it. And so what happened was, after I came out of depression, I asked myself, Chude, I'm a very ambitious person. So I have a figure, I have an amount I do want to make in my life. And that's just because I'm like, look, in Nigeria, criminals are making this amount of money. If I'm so bright, I should be able to make this money. Like, this is the evidence of my
it's a good point. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I asked myself, Chude, what is your enough number? What's the number that when you get to, even if you don't achieve that other aspirational number, you will not do anything extra that is against your own spirit when you get to this number? And I wrote and I did it. And, so my life changed a number of ways because of that. And I say, and like, what are the things that I'm afraid of? What is the things that are making me hustle in Nigeria? Oh, healthcare. Oh, security. Oh, the fact that I have so many mentors that got broke and there was no social security for them and nobody cared about them. And I said, okay, so build your financial future in a way that you are not exposed to that risk and refuse to do anything else that violates your spirit or that makes you overwork. And these are just small tweaks. This health insurance, this savings, this investment, hedge this risk. And I'm like, So sometimes somebody asks me, somebody reaches out to me and says, I have a young mentee who is in government. And so when he was in government, everybody that was his mentor, of course, started visiting him often in Abuja. And because it's time to reap what they sowed. And so anytime he sees me in an airplane, he say, Chude, why haven't you come to see me? So last time I asked him, why haven't you come to see me? Because you entered government, that means that we know. But I'm saying that in my previous iteration, he wouldn't have been able to invite me to Abuja. I would have called him and said, how are we going to do this? What opportunities exist? But I realized that those things killed my spirit, silenced my inner voice, made me spend time with people I didn't like and I didn't respect, made me sometimes respect myself less because of so people think not economic compromise, so when I talk of integrity, I'm not talking about integrity the way we define it. I didn't collect bribes, I didn't steal money, no. I'm talking about internal integrity. The fact that I had to be quiet when I wanted to say something because of certain relationships that I didn't even like. All of that is part of hustle culture, thinking that we have to do things we don't enjoy and don't believe in order to get the things we want to live the life that we want. And I no longer believe in that at all. I think it's a trap. I think that there's this idea of mimetic desire. It resonated very deeply with me when I first encountered it coming out of depression. And I did an audit of my desires, the things that I wanted. And I'm like, I don't even want these things. But everybody else wants them. So I thought I had to want them as well. And yeah, so that's hustle culture annoys me. When I give public speeches, it's one of the things I attack the most for younger people. They struggle with it because you say money doesn't bring happiness. But it's because you have money. So first of all, I tell them, I don't even think I have enough. I don't even think that I and Burna Boy can buy the same things at the same time. That's one. Secondly, but is it not someone that has money that has the credibility to tell you that money is not going to bring happiness? So this is something I've spent so much time talking about it because it has become one of my pet courses. Telling a young person, look, do what you believe in. You're already doing this. You are supremely talented in this. Don't shift away from it. Don't hustle. You're already making organic revenue from your business. You don't need investment. The investors will put you under incredible pressure. Just those things about follow your spirit, follow your intuition, listen to your body, listen to your mind. Those kinds of things have become deeply important to me as an antidote to hustle culture. Hustle culture is killing too many people physically, first and foremost. So many of us, I began to deal with high blood pressure at the age of 18, because I started working at the age of 15. So what would have happened? It's a cancer, on our collective consciousness. And I just feel like that's the message I most want to drive to young Nigerians whenever I meet them. Like, there's a better way. There's another way. There's a better way. There's another way. Yeah.
That would have been a good way to close it, but a question has just come to my head while you were talking. And, everyone knows about, depression is a mental health issue, as we know. But I wanted to ask you, as someone who's been through this and maybe talking about it, I don't know, might help somebody listening to this show, but what is the physical side of depression, right? So the one you actually feel on your body, and what is it like? And maybe how do you get over it, or what are the ways in which you overcame that side of it?
That's the physical side of it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So the thing that when it comes to physical, the most important thing is tiredness. It's just exhaustion. And I remember I said I wrote in the book. I don't know if I described the book. I remember one day I was climbing up the stairs of my house, and I couldn't take the next step. So this wasn't a psychological thing. I physically couldn't take the next step, and that exhaustion surprised me about depression, because I always thought it was a mental thing. So my mind is distorted. But I wasn't ready for the physical thing, the lack of mobility. So how that affects work, and how that affects, and if you're a knowledge worker, how that affects your ability to think, to create. If you're a creative, how that affects your ability to create. So that physical tiredness is the principal part of the physical symptoms of depression as I experienced it, because even though there are commonalities, most people experience things differently. The other part of it is that if you have any physical ailment, somehow depression makes it worse, for most people. I guess it makes sense, because if your mind is your central operating system, then even the places that are supposed to heal quicker will be slowed down in terms of their reflexes. So just anything. I remember the back pain got worse. I always dealt with back pain, it got worse. My Tourette syndrome, my number one symptom is twitching on the right side, got worse. So I used to have constant migraines that goes and comes on my right side of my head. It got worse. So physically, any physical illnesses you're dealing with seem to get worse, or your mind seems to conceive of them as more painful when you're dealing with depression. Yeah. So when people say it's all in your mind, I'm like, but that's where all the action is. It's like my mind is propelling every part of my physical body. And so my physical body cannot function optimally because my mind is not functioning optimally. So those are the two things in terms of physical symptoms that I experience with depression. Okay, I'll just read the ending version, which is the cheesiest part of this book. It's funny to people. It started by talking about how people think that the reason why I went to do with Chude was because, I was criticized so strongly from doing political work that I went into a safe space. And I said, long-term vision. Once, while I was toiling out of the mainstream, as Bella Naija put it, and worrying about my decision to go from consulting for the United States government to building a small walk-in center for people dealing with depression, I had to write this down to encourage myself. Planned Parenthood went big, Alcoholics Anonymous went small. Amazon went big, the Boy Scouts went small. Occupy Nigeria went big, WhatsApp went small. Barack Obama went for the top fast, Bill Clinton went through the ranks first. Today you can go big, you can go small, you can go any place you want to go. What you need to do is choose what you want to be and to be it as best as you possibly can. Strategy? No. I needed that self-motivation when I lost half of my income after leaving my job as chief executive, lost multiple sources of supplementary income when I stopped accepting speaking engagements, started a business that had absolutely no model in this market, moved to a new city to live an anonymous life, decided to replace networking with prayer, and completely invested my life savings in this crazy vision. No, this was certainly not strategy, unless by strategy you mean faith and trust. Faith that the universe was asking a question, and the only answer was my name is my name.
Awesome. Thank you. For listeners and viewers, if you go to book.withchude.com, you can order a copy of Chude's new book, How Depression Saved My Life. Chude Jideonwo, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you on Frontier Matters.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. As you know, I'm a fan of the show, I'm a fan of the podcast. And there were questions I'm like, only Toby and Faye will ask me those questions. And so my team was like, some of them hadn't heard of it, understandably. And they're like, why? I'm like, no. That's the one I'm going to enjoy the most. So I'm very glad to have joined you guys. And you guys,
Thanks
as you know, the platform is incredible. I pray that it really finds a business model because it will be a loss if it's no longer here.
Thank you very much.
Amen to that.
Thank you. Take care. All right. Bye.